Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie Odanutsky. I'm a PhD student at the University of Albany and an executive committee member for Women in Neuroscience, WiN. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome all of you to our very first webinar. I hope you're just as excited as I am, as we all are, to be hosting this. I hope you're excited to be here. Hopefully we'll all get a lot out of this tonight. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that this event is being recorded, so make any kind of adjustment you feel you may need to. I'd also like to take a moment to get us all kind of grounded and ready to get the most out of this webinar. There's a lot of sources of stress these days, whether we're conscious of it or not. There's a lot of things going on. I'm sure a bunch of us just burst through the door and ran to our computer and got the video going after being in traffic, after being in lab all day. So me personally, I was convinced it was Monday until about 11 a.m. So let's just maybe take a moment with this in mind and take a few seconds, take a deep breath or two, whatever you need to just kind of be in the moment so that, again, you can get everything that you can out of this webinar. We hope that it's very encouraging. This group is meant to be a community. It's meant to be upbuilding. So we hope that you will take that away with you. But first, in order to do that, if you would like to join me, just take some deep breaths. Do 4 seconds in and 6 seconds out. If it's not your thing, that's totally fine. I used to be those people too. It wasn't my thing until it suddenly became my thing. So again, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out. So another one. Okay. Hope we're all feeling a little bit more present, a little bit more refreshed, if you will, so we can get everything started. So I'm gonna pass the torch over to Rose, who's gonna tell you everything you need to know about this wonderful organization she started. I'm excited. I hope you are too. Rose.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Also much needed for me. It's been a hectic week, and I think for a lot of us. So welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Rose DeGuzman, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at MGH. And for so many years, I actually wanted to launch WiN, but grad school kept me busy like everybody else. But immediately after defending, I think within the week, I called up an amazing group of women, the executive committee that you see here right now, who share the same vision. And together, we've actually worked hard the past couple of months to launch Women in Neuroscience. Our mission is to provide a community for women to seek guidance, mentorship, support, and encouragement tailored to each step, including from high school, community college, undergrad, grad, postdoc, faculty, to anyone interested in learning about neuroscience. So throughout the event, you'll get to meet the rest of the wonderful WiN team, including Natalie, who just de-stressed us, to Laurie, Joe, Katie, and Christina. So we have exciting events and initiatives lined up this year and hopefully next year. And we're so excited to kick off our Leading WiN series tonight. So for World Alzheimer's Month, we actually wanted to highlight dedicated neuroscientists committed to Alzheimer's research. So I will be going over why I nominated Melise, and Laurie and Joe will also. So I was really eager to invite Melise because not only for her work in Alzheimer's research, but also because of her mentorship of underrepresented STEM enthusiasts, in addition to spearheading 2 lab projects, applying to several grants and fellowship apps, exploring patent options for a 3D printed brain matrix, all during her first semester, just an all-around amazing woman. And she's a second-year PhD student, and she's done so many amazing things already. So I've been so excited to hear more about her story. Also, I haven't mentioned, but she's also a rock climber, which is amazing. That's been one of my dreams. And I'm like, I saw photos of her and I'm like, oh, she has to be here. So I'll pass it on to Joe and Laurie.
Hi, I'm Joanna Mdina. I'm also a UAlbany PhD student. And I personally wanted to invite Kristen Zulaga, not only because she's an amazing Alzheimer's researcher, but because she's an excellent mentor to students at all career stages. I can see her postdocs raving about her, so I can imagine she's great. Um, and also, she's a really active member of our community and promoting neuroscience awareness, not only to those who are familiar to science, but to the lay community. So I think those efforts are really worth mentioning and highlighting, and I'm glad she's here as part of our webinar. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Laurie Ama Colon, and I'm also an executive member of the WiN team. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dr. Yakel Quiros to our webinar this evening, and I chose to reach out because for our very first WiN webinar, because it's especially inspiring for me as a Latina neuroscientist to not only see other minority members in the field, but also as leaders. And so to become a director of multiple research programs at one of the most prestigious institutions in the globe is really no small feat. And so what's also especially exciting to me about having her here tonight is that she continues to teach, train, and serve minority communities with her research. And so we're really excited to have her here and discuss her journey and her really exciting research programs. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
So should I start?
Yes. If you would, Dr. Yakel.
Sure. So thank you. First of all, I had to congratulate the committee for this great idea and for putting this together. It's amazing, and I'm going to be keeping an eye for future events because it's a great opportunity for all women at like all career stages. So thank you, and congratulations for that. And thank you for the invitation today as well. Just to give you I think I have 5 minutes, maybe 4 minutes now, to talk about myself. So I'm originally from Colombia, so from Medellin, Antioquia. I grew up there and I stayed there until I was done with my bachelor's degree. And during my bachelor's degree, I got the opportunity to start working with some Colombian families with autosomal dominant Alzheimer's disease. Pretty much families that develop Alzheimer's disease in their 40s. And it was quite an experience to follow this family when I was even like a sophomore in college. And I got really close to those families. And after I completed my degree, I pretty much made a commitment to one of the families that I was going to dedicate any time that I have in my career to help somehow to find a cure for the disease. So in Colombia, we have more than 6,000 individuals that belong to these families. And since Alzheimer's disease doesn't have any cure or any treatment, so it's pretty much like we see members of these families dying with the disease at all times. So it has been quite an experience there. And unfortunately, because at that time when I was in college, there were not a lot of opportunities for graduate school in Colombia. So we didn't have a lot of masters, we didn't have PhDs or anything. So I kind of like made the commitment to move to the States to see if I could advance my training. And so with my husband, we moved here to Boston. He was also kind of like planning his training. And when I first came to Boston now 17 years ago, I had no English at all. So I pretty much the first thing that I did in the first year was to learn English. And I think that I'm still learning, but that was the first big challenge, trying to learn a second language. And then I applied and completed my master's degree in cognitive neuroscience at Boston University. Then I applied for PhD programs, and actually I got into the cognitive neuroscience program first with the PhD. I was in that program, and we can talk more about that as well. I was in a PhD program in cognitive neuroscience for 3 years. And after 3 years, I realized that in order to get where I wanted to be, I needed to be a clinician. So I applied to clinical programs in psychology to become a clinical neuropsychologist. And I was admitted into the program. And after 3 years of being a PhD student, I was sent back to first year of PhD to complete my training in clinical neuropsychology. So I was a PhD student for a long time, completed all the training. And after that, I got a very prestigious grant from the NIH, that is an early independence award that pretty much gave me the money to establish my own lab right after PhD. And I chose a Mass General to start my lab in familial dementia neuroimaging lab to continue my work with the Colombian families. But in this opportunity, bringing the Colombians to Boston, so we could actually advance their neuroimaging and understand the families better. So in 2014, I launched what I call COLBOS, that is the Colombian Boston Biomarker Study. And as part of that, individuals from these families that I was working with them when I was a college student are now, but were before COVID, coming monthly to get all the examinations here. So I think that's my time, right? Okay, I can check more later, but that's pretty much now. I am, after a few years, an associate professor at the Harvard Medical School and the director of the Familial Dementia Neuroimaging Lab and the Multicultural Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Mass General.
Thank you so much. And we'll ask Melise to please introduce herself.
Yeah, do you want me to go ahead and share screen?
Oh, sure.
I'll take it over, okay. So I have like a really basic presentation. If you can all see this. Let's see, here we go. So yeah, I kind of had an unorthodox path to becoming like a neuroscience PhD student. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to just share some photos and kind of go through that, what that experience kind of looked like as fast as I can, as I know, 5 minutes, right? So here we go. So I am originally from the South. I'm from North Carolina. It always comes out when I say the word North Carolina. And I went to Virginia Tech for a year, dropped out, and then I spent a year at home working and supporting my family and just working at like Kmart and the mall for like an entire year. Nothing will make you want to go back to school more than like customer service. So I ended up going back to App State, and this is where I got my first take at like undergrad research. So this is me. I worked with Eastern Bluebirds and got to do a lot of awesome behavioral work, naturalistic, like in a field setting. And I absolutely loved it. So we got to like look at their behavior and supplemental nutrition and asking like, how does that affect their mate choice behavior and their personality? And it was just so much fun. I really loved it. I think like, as intoxicating as that research environment was, the idea of research as a career was so nebulous, right? It's like, I had no idea what grad school was. I had no idea what a master's was or a PhD or what the difference was. So to be honest, I just tried to apply for jobs like crazy to get money and to try to see what I liked. So my next job was working with the National Park Service. I worked with every species you can imagine on the Blue Ridge Parkway, part of the Appalachian Mountains. So like fog turtles, hellbenders, which is this kind of crazy thing in the middle here, bats, snakes, flying squirrels. And I loved the species I worked with, but I hated it. I hated being outside 16 hours a day, trudging through the woods. I just knew that like, I loved research, I loved animals, but I didn't want to be out there trudging. So I needed to find something else. Jobs that are in the research kind of tech or wildlife tech are so hard because they pay you half of minimum wage and they expect you to travel all around the world to go get those jobs. So as I was applying for jobs, as this job was ending, I had an offer to either go make $7 an hour working as a wildlife tech in the middle of Utah, middle of nowhere, or work as a like marketing salesperson in Seattle. So guess what I chose? I went right to Seattle. I just thought, maybe the research and that's just not for me. I'm going to try something different and see if I like it. And guess what? I absolutely hated that too. So I just thought, okay, I love this area. It's beautiful. But I really miss research and I really miss working with animals, and no way am I going to be in marketing or sales. And this was a company that I was sponsored by as a rock climber, which is kind of how I got that offer probably. So the next thing that I did was had to start at the very bottom. Is when you're working in research and switching to a new field, you do have to start at the very bottom. So I was an animal technician in a couple of different labs. I got to work with these beautiful animals. Pigtailed macaques are one of my absolute favorite animals in the world. But unfortunately in that lab, I just didn't like the research question, even though I absolutely loved the animals. So then I worked, a year later, I worked at another lab. This was at the Allen Institute for Brain Science. And there was the first time I really got a glimpse of the field of neuroscience. I did not have a neuroscience major at my school. I did not have that sort of introduction to the field. And so when it clicked, like behavior in the brain, it just made so much sense. And I just thought, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to do. And I loved it. So I worked my way up from being an animal technician to an animal technician 2 to a research associate doing stereotactic surgeries. I had to convince them that I was competent enough and could do this, and convince myself, honestly, too, that I could do this. So it was really cool doing these sort of 2-photon imaging, surgeries for 2-photon in vivo imaging, and looking at sort of the visual cortices in real time, which is amazing. And then last, I worked my way up from there to a lab manager at the VA Medical Center, working with oxytocin and its role in brown fat thermogenesis. And that was when I first thought, okay, maybe this is the path for me. I definitely think that I can apply to, become a PhD student and make this my career. And yeah, I had a 2.8 GPA. Again, when you're working a lot in college, I think it is a little bit more challenging to do working part-time, plus your volunteer work, plus your research, plus your classes. Something's got to give. And for me, it was probably art history, like all the classes that were not necessary to my core classes. So anyways, I did get into a PhD program, which is where I'm at now. And I'm so grateful because now I get to do what I love every single day, and it's amazing. So I'm in the hormones and cognition lab and working with a small non-human primate called the common marmoset. And so this has been just a dream come true, getting to combine this sort of behavior and cognition with working with a model that I really absolutely love. So we study the sort of natural aging of this species and ask questions about sex differences and their aging trajectories, with a focus as using the natural aging of the marmoset as a model for Alzheimer's, or exploring its potential. And I'm really interested in the effect of sex hormones on cognition and aging trajectories too. Of course, we can ask a lot of different questions and look at their sleep and personality and thermoregulation and all of these really cool things. But for me, it's always going to be in the context of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. And yeah, outside of the lab, I do rock climb. I used to compete for about 10 years. I've been sponsored for about 12 years, and love to read, write, sing, dance, Beyonce all day, and that's pretty much it. So I can stop now.
Thanks so much, Louise. We'll pass it off to Kristen.
Yeah. It was so great to hear both of your stories. I think it's really fantastic. I want to thank Joanna for inviting me and for all the organizers. I think I'm so excited about what you've started here, and I can't wait to attend all of the other sessions as well. So I started in research as an undergrad at San Diego State University. I'm from San Diego originally. I actually met my now husband in my undergrad lab. And my husband is also was the PhD mentor for 2 of our organizers here today. So for both mine. But I worked in a neuroendocrinology lab there, studying sex differences in the brain. And then my husband's a little bit older than me, so we had to do a lot of these moving for taking turns moving for each other's careers and balancing all these things. So he went to Michigan State for his graduate work, and I wasn't quite ready. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to study yet. And so I went there and I worked in a vascular physiology lab. And I realized that I really like the idea of blending those two research experiences together. And so now I study blood vessels in the brain and how that damage to those blood vessels can affect dementia, and look at sex differences in that. When I went to graduate school, I went to Colorado State University in a neuroendocrinology lab, again, looking at sex differences. A year into my program, my PI moved our entire lab to Arizona, and so we moved again. And then I got a co-mentor there who was a vascular physiologist, and so I was studying sex differences in the blood vessels in the brain. For my first postdoc, I went to Oregon Health Science University, and which was in Portland, Oregon, which I love that place. It was amazing. Really fun. Got to bike to work every day, and like it was the best commute ever. You rode like this gondola thing up to the hospital, rode over bridges. It was really cool. But I studied sex differences in stroke, which is disease caused by damage to the blood vessels in the brain. So all very related to everything that I've been interested in. And when I was in that stroke lab, we then started studying vascular dementia. So vascular dementia can happen after you've had a stroke, but more commonly it's due to other damage of blood vessels in your brain. And so that's kind of when I started getting interested in dementia. I did a second postdoc because the husband got a faculty job in Albany, New York. So I was like, okay, we're moving to Albany. And I found a postdoc position that I absolutely loved, and I was studying sex differences and how blood vessels in the brain change with age. So it was kind of perfect for me. And actually that second postdoc mentor is now, Sally Temple is now my collaborator, like on my R01 that I have. So it was a good move for me. But yeah, my husband and I somehow made the two-body problem work, and we were able to, now we're both associate professors in the same city, universities 10 minutes apart, both running our neuroscience labs. So, you know, living the dream. And I think outside of the lab, I'm a mom, I have a 5-year-old. I think, you know, my passion right now is just like hanging out with my kid, who I love, and I love being a mom. And I think this is a great job if you are a parent, because it is more flexible than a lot of other jobs out there. So I'm just like super grateful for that. So that's my story.
Thanks so much, Kristen. I believe now we'll start with Q&A.
Yes. So hi, everyone. I'm Katie. That's my picture. You can't see me because my webcam stopped working like a couple of months ago, right before classes started, just in time. Even though every syllabus of my classes says, make sure your camera's on and you're participating. And I'm participating, but you just can't see me. But yes, this is a good time to transition to the submitted questions and answers, or questions. We had a ton of questions submitted, so thank you all for that. But we unfortunately, of course, had to narrow those down because we only have a limited amount of time. Me and Christina are going to be walking through those now. And for our panelists, you're welcome to answer any of these, all of these, none of these, however you guys want to do it. But the first question someone wanted to know was, what can we do now to help our brains? For instance, would intermittent fasting help, increased cardio, etc.?
Okay, I guess I'll go first. I think that if you're looking for ways to protect your brain health, I would start by the things like exercise, maintaining metabolic health that's good. So, keeping your body weight in check so that you're not obese, not diabetic. I think, education's important. That's something that would have to have been done, earlier in life. But I think that, and not smoking, avoiding head injuries. So, wear a helmet when you're biking and things like that. But I think those would be my main recommendations. I don't know if others have things to add, but that's what I would go with.
I will add two things. One, try to sleep, because sleep is very important for your brain health, and not just in your younger years, but like especially to prevent dementia or something in the future. And, you know, like if you only speak one language, trying to learn another one, because, you know, there is some evidence that being bilingual or multilingual actually helps your brain too. So it's always, it's always the opportunity to learn another language. Doesn't matter how old you are, that will help your brain as well.
I think, and yeah, I agree with both of those. And I think I volunteered with doctor at Harvard Medical who had some of his patients who had mild cognitive impairment. They were doing ballroom dancing. And the reason is because it's combining exercise with something that requires memory, right? You have to memorize sequences. And in some ways, I think it was funny because he and I both were rock climbers too, which is essentially, it's very similar. Like you're combining exercise and this really meditative sort of activity that keeps you in the present, and you have to really focus on your breath work, and you have to memorize kind of where you're going. It kind of combines a lot of these things that you're using at the same time, and it's very social, which is also something that's really important. So yeah, I think all those things and more, but do things that are fun and involve a lot of multifaceted things at the same time, I think is great.
All right, moving on to the second question. Before asking our next question that was submitted, I just wanted to introduce myself as well. I am Christina, and I'm a second-year PhD student also at the University of Albany. And I actually do have the privilege of having Christian's husband as my PhD advisor, and he's really great too. And I'm also an executive committee member. And like Katie said, I'll also be asking our panelists some questions. But our next question is, have you determined, or at least have any insight as to why the buildup of amyloid might only affect some people, not others?
I mean, I think that's one of the things we're trying to find out, right? But I think some people have more cognitive reserve than others, right? And I think there's probably genetic differences too of how you respond to that buildup of proteins in your brain. So maybe some people have more inflammation than others, but I think, you know, this is an area that's heavily investigated right now, but I don't really think we have totally the answers for that unless, you know, someone else does. I certainly don't.
So something that we have seen in our work is like amyloid alone doesn't seem to be the response or the cause for Alzheimer's disease. So in the individuals from these families that I was describing in Colombia, they start accumulating amyloid really early in life, but they only start showing signs of cognitive decline when they actually have a tau pathology. So I mean, like amyloid alone doesn't do anything really. So pretty much like it prepares the road for tau, but only when they have tau is when we start seeing the changes. And as Kristen mentioned, like that also goes with changes in inflammation and other changes as well. So what happens in that time, like for instance, some individuals they hold on to amyloid for longer, if you want to put it that way. That could be like a cognitive reserve. And some of our work actually showed that having like one genetic mutation, for instance, like the one that we reported in Christchurch, actually pushed the onset to tau pathology by 30 years. So I mean, like the person keeps continue accumulating amyloid, but she was fine. And she only started declining when tau came. So like we still don't know for sure what is the response, but we know that there are several factors that impact that relation between amyloid, tau, inflammation, and other factors.
I think you both said it beautifully. Yeah, I think that's one area that I'm really interested in is these sort of individual differences and susceptibility to Alzheimer's disease. So even within our sort of non-human primate natural colony, they're totally along a natural trajectory of aging. We're not doing anything sort of invasive, but they have these cognitive tests that they do. So they kind of have these games, they play on a touch screen, and there's kind of memory and sort of associative learning that they have to kind of navigate through this touch screen, right? And we see individual differences in the way that they're aging and sex differences in the way that they're aging. And so I think one thing that's going to be really interesting is to be able to look at sort of gene expression and kind of see, can we see anything that's sort of highlighting this differential sort of trajectory in aging, even if they're all like the same age, the same body weight, like on the surface level, they all look maybe similar, but is there something underneath that we're just not aware of that might be leading to these differences? So yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And I think I certainly don't know, but I hope to find out.
Thank you. So that was really interesting. I think, well, Yakel kind of already answered this question, but you're welcome to expand upon it if you like. But some people wanted to know what inspired you all to go into Alzheimer's / neurodegenerative disease research specifically.
Yes, I kind of responded already.
Yeah.
It was because I have this early experience when I was a college student, and so yeah, so pretty much since then, I said like, I'm gonna continue doing Alzheimer's research until we find a cure. I was actually, at the beginning, I thought it was going to be only like a few years, and then I will switch to study something else. But here we are, like several decades later, and we still don't have a cure. So it's kind of like, yeah. So that's the motivation.
I think for me, this field is a perfect blend of like my two loves of neuroscience and vascular physiology, like studying vascular dementia and vascular contributions to Alzheimer's disease. It just like really took these two fields that I love so much and merged them together in such a way that was really exciting for me. And also there's just so much we don't know yet. And I feel like there's, I don't know, room to make an impact. And that's kind of how I came into it. But yeah, I don't have a personal story like that.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. So I think for a couple of reasons. One, I definitely have family members who had Alzheimer's, and it's very amazing and shocking to see that in real time. And I just think about it a lot, I think, just because it sounds like the worst thing ever, like losing your memories and just having that sort of, you're present but not really sure like what's going on around you or who's around you, even if they're your loved ones. I think that it just sounds terrible. So I definitely empathize with our like aging population. And I think also it really goes along with my personality, which is like, unfortunately, I have this personality trait where I can always pick out like what's wrong. I can't always give you a solution, but I will, like, if anybody needs an opinion on anything ever, I will always tell you, like, don't do that. This is wrong. So I think in the context of disease, it's a great field for me because I just get to sit there and think about what is wrong, what needs to be fixed, and like what is the problem. And I think I have that sort of mentality that I love focusing on the problem and like what is going wrong in order to fix it, even if I don't have a solution. And I think another thing is just the fact that when you, like in studying vision or something else, like you kind of focus really hard in on like one cell type or one area of the brain. Well, something like this, it's prompted me to look at not just neurons, but neuroglia and like vascularization and gene expression in circuits. It's such an amazing thing to be able to look at all of these different layers from like the gene expression to the behavior. And I love that. So I love just having this excuse to study something that prompts me to look at everything kind of holistically instead of focusing really on like one tiny aspect of the brain.
Yeah, thank you all so much for sharing those stories. Kind of branching off of that, what are challenges that you may have faced outside the lab or academia, and how have you had to advocate for yourself?
One of the challenges I think that Kristen mentioned, actually I mentioned, I also have 2 children. And I think that for people, especially when you're doing research mostly with men, it's really hard to understand that you're also a mother and you also have responsibilities with your children. And that has been a challenge because I have actually to remind my colleagues, hey, sorry, I have 2 kids, I had to pick them from the school, like, sorry, I had to leave. Yeah, it's true, you have kids, like, yeah, so it's kind of like constant reminding people that you also have some responsibilities, a personal responsibility, especially as a mother, and many things can go unexpected with children, kind of like having a call from the school when they were in the school, just to pick them up, or if somebody gets sick and stuff like that. It's yeah, pretty much constantly reminding the colleagues that you have children. I think that's one of the challenges. And I think that with COVID in particularly, oh my God, I even have a template that I will send to my colleagues, like, excuse me, like, the schools are closed, and kind of like, homeschooling the kids, like the template I wrote this, like, just to remind you, this is the situation. If I don't respond to your email in the 24 hours or 48 hours, it's because I'm probably busy homeschooling my 4th grade son. So it's stuff like that. I think that's a challenge, but I think that just keep reminding people until they finally get it.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, learning, one thing I learned when I had a child was kind of like learning to set those boundaries too with your time. For me, I try to have set hours of the day that are my hours that are for my child, and I'm going to be around for him during those times. And so, like, people know in my lab know that, like, in general, like on a normal day, between 5:30 and 9:15, you're probably not going to hear from me, and I'm not going to respond to your emails. But then when my kid goes to sleep, like, then I'll start responding to your emails again. But like during that time, like, I'm normally not going to be. And I think, and on the weekends and stuff, I try to make sure that I'm spending, extra time with them, because they don't, spend nearly as much as, you would normally want to during the week. But, I said this before, and I do really think this is a very flexible job for if you have children, and I'm super grateful for that. I have friends who are clinicians, and, during all of this COVID stuff, they can't work from home, if they're surgeons or something like this. So I think, I think we're pretty lucky with that. And then I would say the only other, I talked about before, the only other like challenge that I think I've had is just, in my science career, whenever we were making big decisions about moving for postdocs and all that stuff, it wasn't just me that I had to take into consideration. My husband and I had to like make those decisions together. And so, trying to balance those two careers, and then now both of us we have a child, but we're both equally busy with our jobs. So also trying to be, it's normally not the best idea for us to have the same grant deadlines. It's better if we alternate cycles. I'm just going to say that. So that one of us is around for the kids. Yeah.
Oh, this question. I feel like there's not enough time in the day to like go over all of these. So I had to write down like a quick list of just a few. The first one that I talk about a lot is probably just financial access and like privilege. I think I talked about it before, but like when you're working and you have to support yourself as an undergrad, and be financially independent throughout basically your entire adult life, that creates for like such different trajectories for like what is feasible. Like after, in undergrad right now, it's like people are expected to somehow have the money to pay for GRE tests and relocate across the country, thousands of dollars and first month's rent, last month's rent. That's really not like feasible for like the vast majority of the population, I'd assume, especially for marginalized communities. So that I think was one of the first things that I saw in academia that I didn't like, was just how much more challenging it can be to get into this community if you don't have like adequate like people to lean on, I guess, for support. I think, oh gosh, so many. Other thing I think is just a lack of representation. I think we all probably know this as women, but then for women of color on top of that, you kind of feel like you might be the only one all the time, like in your lab space, and maybe in your entire program, maybe in your entire department. It just is a very isolating feeling, and you might have like a lack of representation, so you might not even see any faculty who look like you, or kind of understand like what that entails in terms of your background. And with that too, I think when you have that sort of lack of representation, I think that it can lead to people, it can be really shocking to know that people don't really know about the history that you know. So like this year, for the first time, we've kind of been having more discussions about race. And I've heard people exclaim that they didn't know things that I knew probably as like a 4-year-old, you know, like, or I felt as a 4-year-old, the racism that I felt as a young kid. So hearing that people not only maybe don't care, or maybe they're just not aware of things that you've known your entire life is kind of jarring in a way. So one thing I've been trying to advocate for is just for myself and have people take on that work, self-educate, join DEI committees and educate themselves and do this work, because the last challenge I think is just disproportionately doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work, while a lot of my peers will opt out. And I understand to a degree, but at the same time, I'm taking on all that work while writing 12 grants, while doing research, while mentoring 9 students, and I'm also trying to further my career. So the work is just not equal while we're here, and hasn't been equal since I've been here. So, or before I even came here. So those are just a few of the challenges, and I would really recommend, hopefully we'll get to talk about later, but advocating for yourself and not feeling like you're a bad person for just trying to inspire people to do more. I think that the complacency or sort of ability for people to kind of opt out of the work because they say that they're too busy. Oh, well, if we all did a little bit, maybe it wouldn't be so taxing for 1 or 2 people. So yeah, I think those are just a few to name.
Yeah, I think that brings up a couple of really good points, especially because, like you said, this year is bringing more challenges than ever for women, especially Black women and women of color. And actually, my next question applies specifically to you, Maylise, but probably to everyone else as well if you have some input. And I have to say, I used to be ashamed of it, but I am your GPA twin in terms of I also had a 2.8 in undergrad. So the next question that someone else, I swear it wasn't me, submitted was, what advice would you give to someone with a low GPA and limited research experience, but who wants to get into a competitive program to pursue graduate or medical school?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm sharing that more freely now. I definitely was embarrassed of it before, and it was even lower than that at a point. That was me when I turned my act around. So, but again, I think that when you have different pressures and kind of struggling with juggling all these things at the same time, maybe even having like, you know, trouble with mental health or a lot of different things. I mean, there are just GPA is not indicative of your intelligence. It is honestly a measure of privilege, in my opinion. Since now that I'm a PhD student, first semester, you know, 3.8. And why? Is because I have secondary income. I've never had to worry about like food or health insurance or any of these things that I used to worry about in undergrad. It's a completely different story, and I could focus and I knew what I wanted to do, and I have different study habits. So I just want to encourage you that, number one, your GPA doesn't define you as a person. It doesn't define your level of intelligence. One thing that I did was taking classes online to kind of boost it up a little bit. You can definitely find ways to take one class at a time while you're working full time, which is what I did. Maybe even a couple classes if you can, you know, manage it. Anything that you can do to kind of boost that GPA up on paper. I think getting a ton of research experience is amazing. And I think that's probably the only reason I got into a program was I came to a PhD program at 29 years old. So not at 21 or 20, which a lot of students do, but I had so many years of research experience before I started. So if you can just get into the framework of like, I will be a doctor one day, but right now I need to put in the work, right? You heard me talk about going from an animal technician to a PhD student. So it took years of doing that, but if you have a goal in mind and you know it's what you want to do at your heart, like at your core, like you can definitely just put in that work and do work, like do research that's meaningful and that you love along the way that contributes to this goal of, okay, well, I'm going to apply to a PhD program. And for me, that was definitely like years in the making. Like I knew I wanted to do a PhD, and then like 4 or 5 years later after working, then I applied. You know, it has to be a long-term goal. And then just my last piece of advice would be just knowing what it is like at your core that excites you. So I think if you have something that really pulls at you and a question or research questions that really excite you, it just makes it that much easier to know exactly like who you are and why you're doing it and why you want to do it. And you can kind of continue, because there will be some challenges along that way, going from a low GPA to going to a competitive program. It's very challenging, but if you know why why you're doing this, then that can kind of help as well. Well, the last thing was going to just say, explain it on your apps. Don't try to hide it or think, oh, maybe they won't notice on my transcript. They definitely notice. So in my transcripts, I always made sure that I noted them, and that my letter recommenders or letters of recommendation, that they were noting it, saying like, I know that she had these stumbles or they had these stumbles, but I've seen their work and it's amazing, and it doesn't, I have full faith that they're going to do great. So just make sure that all of these people are on board and rooting for you too.
I just wanted to second how important it is to, one, get the research experience if you can. Like if you can afford the time that it takes to get that extra research experience, that'll make a huge difference. But also really important to have those letter writers advocate for you, and maybe talk to them about all the reasons that you think that they should have in those letters, and really sit down and have those conversations with you so they can be really strong advocates for you, because the letters matter a lot. So I agree totally.
All right. Well, I think that these are really great points. And I know that they can definitely be helpful to those that are watching this, and probably my past self as well. But for our final submitted question, we were just wanting to know, we already lightly touched on it, so maybe just going a little more in depth about examples maybe, but how have you maintained a work-life balance? So keeping up with publication and grant pace, spending time with your family, whether it's your kids or just taking care of loved ones, and while also trying to maintain both your mental and physical health.
Well, I don't even know if it is possible to have a balanced work life. That's one of the challenges every single day. But I work with a schedule, and I even put the well-being time on my schedule. Even if it is just like a walk, I'm gonna walk for 30 minutes, and it's in my schedule and it's booked, and nobody can book anything in that time. In the weekends, then I have blocks or times that are like, time to play with my kid, taking to the playground. Before it used to be like taking to swimming lessons or soccer lessons or whatever. So, but it's in the calendar that everybody, like pretty much the people that work with me, they know that there's kind of like reserved time, and they cannot book anything there. So it's pretty much put it in the schedule and make it as important as any other appointment in your schedule.
Yeah, I just really want to agree with that. I think for me too, like I have set time that's set aside for my family and for me for exercising every day, and like that's part of my normal routine, and that's like sacred time. And then during my work time, I would say also am like really, really into the scheduling and like setting daily goals for myself of what I want to achieve, so that at the end of the week, I'm not going into the weekend super stressed out that I didn't accomplish anything I wanted to accomplish, because each day I'm making sure that I set aside half of my day to deal with those really meaningful tasks that are not urgent but are important. So the things like writing that are never, unless you're really close to a grant deadline or something, aren't that urgent, but they're really important. So just making sure you set aside time every day for those things. And so, for me, every day, I make sure that I have those work priorities, that I set aside time for exercising, I have time that I hang out with my family, like all together. And then after my kid goes to bed, like me and my husband have our alone time together, because I think that's important too. I think just, being very protective of all of that time is how I make it work, at least.
Yeah, I was very interested to hear from both of you. I was hoping to get some tips too. To be honest, it's been a struggle. I think I was okay the first year of PhD, and my strategy has definitely changed. I've tried to adapt to different schedules, different demands, but it's a struggle. I think, especially if you're pretty involved extracurricular activities, it's like very challenging. So yeah. I think I've definitely lived by my planner. I have just started scheduling. You have like your classes and sort of meetings and things that are like non-negotiable, but then also having non-negotiable time, like you mentioned, like for exercise, for like just reading, you know, like if you like have a, you know, you think that you have, oh, this is a free time in my schedule, like nope, put that time and schedule, like, okay, this is when I'm going to work on this assignment or this grant or this something, but just kind of be really deliberate about planning your time. And I actually have every Sunday we try to get together with some girlfriends and plan our calendars out together. And so just be like, okay, write down all the things that you have to do that week. What are, you know, kind of integrate with like SMART goals, if you've ever heard of those, SMART. They stand for something, but clearly I don't know. But basically it's just kind of making sure that you have really specific, measurable, attainable, realistic goals. And like, you know exactly what you need to do to achieve something that week. I'm a big fan of, you know, the planner I have has like a spot where you can mark like, check if you meditated today, check if you exercised today, you know, and then you can write in your own things too. So for me, it's, you know, spending time with my partner, my dog, and my friends. But at the end of the month, also assessing, it has like this reflection, and you have to fill in like how many hours did I, you know, exercise or hang out with my friends or things like that. And it really puts it in perspective for me when I start to see like that friend time, that family time, that everything goes down and it's just all work. And sometimes it is like that. I won't lie. Especially this semester, you think that a pandemic things would be less crazy, and somehow it's just been like more work than I've ever done in my entire life. But yeah, I think it's just constantly, if something's not working, just constantly reevaluate and try to figure out something else that'll work. That's the best I have right now.
And I will just add that try, even in addition to all of that, try to do something that is like your time, something that you enjoy, something that is important for you, not for everybody else, or not out of plan, and something that you enjoy doing. Because I think that at the end of the day, you know, it's also important to feel happy and be happy with yourself and what you do. So like, you know, I even have the happy times, like once a month when I can just go for an ice cream because I like ice cream, or I can just go for a manicure because I used to go for manicure because I like to get a manicure. That's something that is just relaxing and is something that you do for yourself, not for your kids or your husband or your work or your friends or your family, but only for you.
Definitely. And I feel you on the ice cream thing too. I think, do we have time for live questions, or what are we thinking? Rose, I'll leave it up to you. A few maybe?
Yeah, let's, Natalie, Laurie, what do you all think?
Well, first, thank you guys very much for your candid responses. I always enjoy the sincerity in your answers. I think that's really what we're striving for, is like, you know, honesty. I think a lot of times we hear like academia is great and our job's awesome, science is great, everything's going smoothly, nothing horrible's happening in lab. No, sometimes things are difficult, and I really appreciate your honesty and what you have faced and what it took to get there and where you are. That very happy to see that you're succeeding in all your endeavors. If you guys see in the chat, you have the opportunity to ask our panelists any kind of questions you might have. I want to take an opportunity to do that. Or you can also unmute yourselves, feel free to ask. Now is a good opportunity. Or they just answered all of your questions in that. It was very nice and in-depth. Let's see here. Yes, that's right. If you're shy, you can also direct message everyone. If you'll take note, if you scroll through the participants on here, you can see some of us put on our Twitter handle. If you want to follow us, you can also ask us questions there. But if no one has any other questions, I think we can move forward with future events. Let's take a look here.
So that's me again, I believe, right?
Yes, yeah. Back to you, Katie.
All right. Back to me.
I always wanted to say that. It makes me feel like
the weatherman.
Back to you, Katie. It's gonna get cold soon.
It is gonna get cold soon. All right, so I guess we'll pretty much wrap up there. Again, as Maylee said, you could DM any of the panelists. I mean, I don't want to speak for Yakel and Kristen, but you can also message any of us on the executive committee. I probably do it too much, but I love like helping people who have questions that I could possibly answer. Sometimes I can't answer them, but I can at least point you in the right direction. But thank you so much to everyone, both those in attendance and especially to our amazing panelists. We hope that this has been an interesting and enlightening experience for everyone. It definitely was for me. We're hoping to have a webinar similar to this one next month that will probably focus on research on ADHD, because it's going to be, I think, ADHD Awareness Month or week or something. And details about that will follow over the next few weeks. And if you know any women, either personally or just from Twitter and other conferences and stuff like that, that are studying ADHD, definitely let us know, because we're looking for panelists for that now. And in addition to that, we're planning on having quote unquote Ask Me Anything, AMA, if you've ever seen those sessions, for women at various stages of their careers who can bring up burning questions they might have about how to navigate their next steps. And one of the first ones will probably be for undergrads to ask to graduate students, just because most of our executive committee are graduate students at various points. So we'll be it'll be easiest for us to answer those. And I think the last thing is we're going to be sending out a super short feedback survey over the next few days, just because we want to make sure we're constantly improving and making these webinars what you all want them to be, because ultimately this group exists to serve you. So if you could just fill that out, that would be super, super helpful for us. And if no one has anything else, then thank you all once again for tuning in. And I hope you all have a good rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.